Hey everybody, Terry here, 2-6 Golfer. Guys, welcome to the 2-6 Club Embodied webinar on how we're going to do what? Be more consistent, get more distance, lower our scores. Okay, now, the first part of this webinar, I'm going to identify why we have swing flaws. I'm going to identify why we have so many swing thoughts. Okay, and then in the subsequent 3 or 4 sections, I'm going to go through on how we fix hitting major swing flaws, how we fix our major swing flaws. Okay, by utilizing what? Utilizing the 2-6 process. Okay, with your golf swing. So let's get to it now. Why do we have so many swing flaws, and why do we have so many swing thoughts? If you think about that, guys, we've been watching videos for years now. There's no shortage of videos online that try to teach us how to swing the golf club. And for 15 years, I did the same thing. I watched YouTube, and I tried to pick out the videos I needed to make me a better golfer. However, it didn't work. So what happens? What I did, guys, was I was watching the tour pros on my DVR, and I wore out the batteries, slowing down their positions, okay, and sort of comparing them to what I'm learning. And the positions that I saw within those tour pros were different than what I was being taught. Now, I'm not saying that I can swing like a tour pro. I'm just simply saying that the positions were different. And I think that if we all are honest with ourselves, we can get in the same positions as the tour pros. We may not be able to swing like them, but we can certainly get in the same positions. Okay, now what do I mean? Well, first of all, let me identify what the swing flaws are. The 4 major swing flaws in golf are slicing, hooking, hitting fat, hitting thin. Okay, so let's go through those briefly in terms of how we identify with why we do certain things or why we have certain swing flaws in our golf swing. Now, let's just take hitting fat and hitting thin, okay? Because they're total opposites of each other. And to sum it all up, guys, it's a weight shift issue, okay? Our weight is shifting too far from our trail side all the way over to our lead side. And I know we've been taught that. I know we've been taught to load on our trail side, load on our trail side. But what happens is when you load too much on your trail side, you have to fix. You have to undo all that load from your trail side and come all the way back to your lead side. Now, for a lot of us, that takes some effort. It takes a lot of effort to try to correct all that swing motion. So let's briefly do this. So if I load on my trail side, I'm going to talk about hitting fat. If I load too much on my trail side, and I've got way too much weight back here, okay, if I don't have enough weight shift, my arms are basically going to drop. They're going to drop behind the ball, and I'm going to dig, a 3-foot trench behind my ball. Because again, there's too much weight shift. I didn't efficiently shift my weight from my trail side to my lead side. Okay, now, why do we hit thin? Well, the biggest reason why we hit thin is when we get too much weight on our trail side, now our head does what? Our head moves forward too much. Our hands, arms come over the top. Okay, we bob up, we bob over, and then what happens is sometimes we even miss the ball. So it's basically our head moving forward, which lifts us up out of our posture. So then now that weight shift that was supposed to go from our trail to the lead side is now going up and down. And when we come through, it's coming up again, and we top the ball. Okay, that's how we hit thin. Okay, now let's address the last 2. Hooking and slicing. Okay, why do we hook the ball? Well, one of the biggest reasons why we hook the ball, guys, is because it's another weight shift issue. When we get too much weight on our trail side here, what happens is we'll come down and we won't shift efficiently enough, and our arms and hands get into it, and then we end up flipping through the ball while hanging back on our trail side. So we'll get here, and we'll just sort of flip at it because that's our last resort. When we flip at it and our weight stays back, now the ball just goes out to the left, sort of like a shank. You see, for left-handed golfers, it goes out to the right. So again, it's a weight shift issue. Okay, now, what about slicing? Well, what happens, guys, when we slice, our club face is coming through the ball too open. So again, what happens? A lot of times our grip is not leveraged enough, okay, to really hit solid shots throughout a round. So what happens is when our grip is not leveraged enough, it comes through too weak. And so when it comes through too weak, it comes through too open. A lot of us, even at setup, we don't even have a true square club face at setup. So what happens is when we slice, we're over the ball, too much weight back here, and then when we come down, okay, our club opens up because our grip is too weak, and then we basically just slice it off to the right. Okay, but again, it's a weight shift issue. Okay, we're coming over the top. Our club is coming over the top because we're correcting all this weight shift to the back, to the trail side. Our club's coming over the top, and we slice the ball. We actually come down from outside to in, okay, and then we cut across the ball, and the ball goes out to the right. So that's what causes a slice. So I've just identified the four major swing flaws in golf. Now, again, in the subsequent parts of this webinar, I'm going to talk about the solutions to these four major problems. Now, when we talk about the swing flaws, and we've talked about this extensively on this webinar, hitting fat, hitting thin, hooking and slicing. When we accumulate those swing flaws, what happens is if our swings are not fixed from the center, then we have to apply what I call swing patches. And it's these swing patches that we all hear subliminally in our minds, in our heads when we look at golf videos. Now what do I mean? Well, here's what I mean. If we don't know how, or if we're not taught to fix, stop swaying, stop twisting, okay, if we're not taught how to fix that, and if we continue to do it, okay, from this position here, too much weight on the trail side, now we have to have, again, what I call swing patches to try to patch up all the flaws that we have on our takeaway and our backswing. So when we get too far back behind the ball, the first thing that we have to do, or try to do, we have to try to fire our hips. And in firing our hips or firing our lower body, that kind of brings us over the top. Because again, we've got too much weight back here. We've already twisted too much. So when we fire hips, our arms now start to come over the top. So firing the hips is a swing patch. Because guys, you're not supposed to fire your hips on the downswing. Okay, the arms and the hips drop together if you stay centered. But for the sake of this argument, because you've swayed too much and you twisted, now you're firing hips. Now the club is starting to come over the top. Now you're going to have to try to shallow the club to prevent it from coming over the top. Now you've got to try to shallow it, okay, because you never fixed your twist and sway. And so now when you're shallowing the club, now you've got to try to manipulate the club face to where you're trying to square the club face at impact. So again, twisting and swaying here, hips firing is a swing patch to try to get you back on your center. As you fire hips, your arms now come over the top. Now you've got to try to shallow the club face or shallow the shaft to somehow get back into position. And then when you shallow the shaft, now you've got to somehow try to square the club face of the ball, because your last resort is to kind of like flip at the ball to try to make up for all the swing flaws that you had in the beginning. So those are the three or four major swing patches that we hear that they're not identified as swing patches. They're identified as how you swing the club. But again, if you're not correcting this, then there's no way you can swing without a swing patch. But if you correct this and stay centered, you don't need all those swing patches. You don't need to lead the club with your lower body. You don't need to fire your hips. You don't need to shallow the club face. You don't need to try to square the club face at impact. Because if you do it right, like we do here at 2-6, all those positions happen more readily because you're already in the right position to begin with on your center. So if I were to hit this little chip shot here, and just employ all the principles of what this is, all I'm going to do is I'm going to stay centered, create space, leave my space, and drop through the ball. That's all I'm doing. In other words, when you take all the motion out of your swing, there's no motion to put back. Okay, everything is what? Everything's right in line, and you're hitting through the ball. Everything's right in line. So you have to take the motion out of your swing. And the motion, again, I'm talking about is quit twisting and swaying You're causing too much motion back here to be corrected on the downswing. Okay, so we have to understand, we don't need those swing patches if we do what? If we correct it from our grip and posture to begin with. And again, the swing patches are that you have to leave with the lower body. You got to fire your hips. You got to try to shallow the club face or shallow the shaft, and then you're going to have to try to square the club face at impact. Guys, that's just too much going on, okay, in the 1 second you have to get down and through the ball. Okay, so we don't want to talk about problems anymore. We want to talk about the solutions to what we do. And we do it all through the 2-6 process here at 2-6, utilizing what? We utilize 2 simple swing adjustments. We make your grip leveraged, we make your posture spine centered to make you more efficient so you can get more into your 6 body positions and your 6 club positions. You can get in those positions more readily, okay, without doing what? Without having a bunch of swing thoughts and a bunch of body motion. Now, I'm going to talk about total solution. Okay, I'm going to basically reiterate what I talked about in the previous sections of this webinar, but I'm not going to bring any swing flaws or any swing patches into it. This is going to be the total 2-6 package right here that you want for consistency, lower scores, and more distance. Okay, the first thing I want to understand is I have to understand that I want to stay centered. I got to have the right leverage grip and the right spine-centered posture, okay, for me to what? For me to stay on my center. When the club tracks back, I want to maintain the space that I already have it set up. I want to maintain the space. I don't want to get here too quickly. I want to maintain the space and have the club continue to move up and around my body. Have the club continue to move up and around the swing plane. If you can do that, you'll have 80% of your swing taken care of before you even swing the club, because that takes all the motion out of your swing. So if I'm going to try to hit pure 2-6 shots here, with my leverage grip, spine-centered posture, okay, space is created, moving through, ball's just jumping up on the green, and again, I'm just using this as motion, as positions for you to see how there's not a lot of motion in my swing as I hit through the ball. Okay, not a lot of motion through my swing. Now I'm just hitting some chips here, so I'm not hitting full shots. Now, you saw full shots on the intro of this webinar, and you're going to see some full shots on the outro. What I want you to see in the middle is total centeredness, okay, making sure I stay on the plane here and continue to move through the ball. Notice that my hips are clearing, okay, but it's not a violent clear. I'm not getting here and trying to move my hips too quickly. The hips are going to move as my arms drop. So if I stay centered, I get here, the arms are dropping, then my hips are moving. It's not a violent move. It's not a violent move at all. So again, I'm hitting off a real tight lie here, so it's a difficult shot. But again, I just want you to see how things are working together here as I hit through the ball. Now, what we call this here at 2-6 is it's a one-piece downswing. So a one-piece downswing means when I get here and I start dropping, my hips start moving as my head stays back. So see how it's a one-piece downswing. So again, I'm over the ball here, over here, extend, one-piece downswing, hit through the ball. See, one-piece downswing, hit through the ball. And once you get more comfortable with the one-piece downswing, then you'll start generating club head speed without trying to swing harder. So it's a one-piece downswing. And see how my hips do move. My hips come down, my hips do move, okay, as I take all the body motion out of my swing.